it would be hard probably at that time for anyone to see the ramifications into the future. But did you at any point in time ever worry about playing one of TV's most, villainous roles, and how that might affect your image overall and how people would view you personally as an actress? Or were you too young at that time? Or did your father spot it from his experience?
A little of all that, because on the one hand, we had no idea how enormous the series Little House on the Prairie would become. We had no clue. Every year when it got renewed and they said, yes, we're going back, we're like, wow, oh, they picked it. Like, we were all surprised. We like didn't realize how huge a hit this thing was. And I guess around the third year, I went, hey, this thing's like in the top 10. And I also realized, hey, wait, when they do the big season opener episode and the big season closer, it's like about me. Oh, wait, that's a hint. Hello, maybe this is working. And I knew I was a villain, and I knew people hated me, and I enjoyed that. I always liked villains in horror movies. So I was like, yes, I'm bad. This is great. When the show did go on and on and on, I remember my father expressing concern, like year 7. He's like, if you sign up again for another 7 years, I mean, it's going to be like Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke. You're going to be this lady on the West. Because I grew up on the show. By the time the show ends, I'm a grown woman. I'm like 19 years old, and they gave me a husband. I got married on the show. I had children on the show. It's like, oh my God, I like live here. And my dad said it could turn into a thing where you're just absolutely locked into this Western. And he wasn't so worried about the being the bitch, or he said, that's kind of good. He said, anybody can play the sweet, pretty girl, but to play this terrible person, he said, that's good. And he said, it's also, he said, because you're funny. And I had started doing stand-up comedy by then as a teenager. He said, that's really good. Beauty fades, but funny is forever.
Yep.
And so he said, you could be a great sex symbol in your 20s, but hey, what do you do later? Whereas if you're funny, well, you can just go. As we saw Carol Channing and get all these.
Carol Channing, Phyllis Diller, Carol Burnett.
Phyllis Diller to 93, Carol Channing to 100.
Betty White.
Carol Burnett's still doing it. Betty White to 100. Yeah, he's like, you can keep doing that. So I was like, good idea. So the idea that it was the comic relief, there was a villain, we're like, well, this is probably really good because you're not just, oh, she's plays a sweet girl. You're doing something exciting. So that may be an advantage for you. Actually, could work out. There was some typecasting when I got off the show and I began auditioning for like TV movies and films and things. I would audition to play the nice girl. And I go, no. And I did get called in to play the bad girl. And I was like, yeah, but I kind of like those roles. So I did get a couple TV movies. I did, Love Boat, Fantasy Island, because everyone did. It was crazy. That was sort of fun. And I was working, but thank heavens I was doing the stand-up, because in my 20s, it was the 80s, and blonde girls in their 20s, as I put at the time, I said, I think you were supposed to be a cheerleader, naked or dead, or a combination of all three. And I did not fit that mold. So I was doing the stand-up, and that allowed me to travel, and I was doing theater and all this stuff. And now I totally get called for really, really bad villains. It's really fun. I just did a play down in North Carolina at the Judson. And I did Agatha Christie's. It was Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap. It's the 70th anniversary. Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap. Big, big deal. And I played Mrs. Boyle, who is awful. She's so mean that literally one of the characters has a line that after I leave the room, the woman actually turns around and says, bloody old bitch. And the audience applauds. I'm that awful. I get murdered. So, yay. I've been called in for these kind of things. I did a movie called Even in Dreams that I did in 2020. Marvelous little movie. Really nice movie about a nice girl who's trying to make it in the music industry. But I played the terrible, evil manager who tries to exploit her and ruin her life. And I liked it. I was like, this is fun. This is an interesting part. So now I don't mind. But there was typecasting, because whenever I've played someone nice, which I swear I've played nice people. I really have. When I've done it, my friends have come to see me and things go, you're so nice. Like, yeah, I swear.
Don't know what to make of it.
That was stunning. You were so nice. And then when I play mean, my friends who actually know me laugh and find it very, they went, it's so weird. You're playing this awful person. You're always playing these awful people, but you're so generally nice. Really nice in person, I'm like, yeah, I know. I get when I was doing Nellie, people would ask my mother, what's she like at home? And my mother would say, I don't know. She's gotten it all out of her system. She's great. She comes home, like takes a nap. So something about playing the villains, I think I get it out of my system there. So I'm generally rather pleasant in real life.
We talked a little bit about when you met Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingalls, and your interactions with her. What about Michael Landon? Tell us a little bit about him. Everybody, as you know, everybody loved him.
Well, we talked about Melissa Gilbert. We became bestie friends.
Yeah.
Melissa Sue, she saw herself as, the serious actress. I mean, she was, all of 10, but she saw herself as the serious actress. And Melissa and I were, I think she thought her mom thought we were like juvenile delinquents. She was probably right. So she's like, I'm not hanging out with you two. And then Michael. So Michael, the big thing people say is like, was he that good looking in person? Yes. The teeth, the white teeth and that mane of hair. He did spend hours on that hair. He did. He loved that hair. He was like constantly putting little highlights in, having a color play. He did everything to that hair, but it was amazing. He looked amazing in person. Very, hanging out in Malibu, the tan. He had a gym. We moved to the bigger set. He had a gym built on the soundstage. So when he needed to like pump up to like, have his pecs and muscles, he could do. So yeah. Oh yeah. He was a little vain. He knew what he looked like. But he really was that good looking, and he was very funny. A terribly funny man. He did not take himself very seriously. He made fun of the fact that he was on Bonanza and people called him Little Joe. He would answer, people would yell, "Hey, Little Joe," and he'd answer, "Oh yeah, hi." "Hey, Little Joe, where's Hoss? Oh, he's back at the ranch with Hop Sing," and he'd laugh. He'd make jokes with fans, and he liked practical jokes. He was always fooling around on the set. He would do the weirdest things. Okay. He knew all these women had crushes on him. So there'd be some woman on the set who'd just be like, it's Charles. And he'd go get a live frog because we're on a location. He'd get a frog and stick it in his mouth and then like walk up to her and go, "Hi," and just let the frog crawl out of his mouth. Disgusting. He would, and then of course they practically have a heart attack. He would do stuff like this all the time. He had this giggle. He laughed. Michael Landon laughed like a girl. Michael Landon had this high-pitched giggle. You could hear him for miles. You'd be out on location. You'd hear, oh, good. Oh, good. Michael's here. And he laughed, and he liked to laugh. He really reminded me of a kid, because people would say, was he like a father figure? And I'm like, well, to Melissa, obviously, he was playing her dad, so very much. But to me, he was kind of like a naughty teenage boy who'd somehow gotten the keys to the studio. He was wild and very, very funny. I really enjoyed working on, but I mean, brilliant. You realize he was directing the show and producing the show and starring in the show and writing like half the scripts. I mean, the guy was genius.
How early did you know that Steve Tracy would be playing your on-screen dad?
The day he showed up for work. It's like, when you get married on TV, it's like an arranged marriage. Like Melissa Gilbert and I were sitting there because she had, okay, she knew she was going to get married. She knew, I mean, come on, Laura marries Almanza. She's like, eventually, I guess they're going to have some guy show up. And ta-da, here's Steve Butler. She didn't get to pick. The only time anybody got to pick, Charlotte Stewart, who played Miss Beadle, when they were casting the guy to be Mr. Sims, who she does wind up marrying. She marries Mr. Sims. They had two guys, and she happened to be there. And they said, "Hey, come here. We're deciding between these two actors. They're both great. Do you have a preference? Hey, you're here. You get to pick." And she looked, and one of the guys she knew, they were both very handsome, but she knew one of them. She'd gone to school with him back at drama school. She went, and she didn't tell them that she already knew him. She went, "Oh, I think he's really good." She's like the guy she already knew. So I was like, "You're lucky," because we didn't get to do that. The kids, we didn't. It was like the Middle Ages, and you're sitting there in your village, and it's like, "Your husband shall be arriving from the other village. The wedding is at noon." You're like, "I don't want to get married." So Melissa, and so they said, "Well, you're getting married." And Michael did tell me, he said, "I have this great idea for her. She gets married, and he's really short, but he won't take anything off anybody. And he's Jewish, and then he leaves the room, and then he comes back and he tells Mrs. Olson to shut up. And oh man, it's so cool. And I followed him. He's in the dressing room with his yellow legal pads and his pencils. I said, "You're writing this now?" "Yeah." I said, "Don't we film that in a couple of weeks?" He's like, "Yeah." It'll be done. I said, you're like writing this right now and making this up as you go along and telling me. So he really wanted to do this episode. So we're waiting around, and every guy who walked onto the set, Melissa and I are like, is that him? Is that him? Oh, I hope that he's cute. Maybe it's him. And then Steve Tracy showed up. And of course, he was adorable with the curly hair and the freckles and those eyes. And we're like, oh, let it be him. He's good. Because we knew they were talking about comedy relief, that Percival would be a funny character, to be a character actor. And in Hollywood, often when they say character actor, they mean not the handsome guy.
Yeah.
They mean we're going to get a guy who's not. And when you're where was I, 17? You're like, could it be the handsome guy? And of course, Steve showed up, and yes, he was brilliant and funny and a great character actor, but he was also very handsome. So I was like, yay, score. And he turned out to be a really fun guy too, and we wound up becoming best friends. So